thanks for stopping by Drama and True Crime. I received a lot of great and positive feedback after my last ASMR True Crime video, so I decided to keep going with it and to take it in a slightly different direction. There's still so many unanswered questions in the death and disappearance of Gabby Petito, and there are more and more questions about what else he may or may not have been involved in. And I've been wanting to do a deep dive into his favorite author for some time to explore the inner workings of that author's mind. I have a good idea of how Brian's brain works. I've been around a lot of Brians in my life, and I know that when people like him get immersed or declare that an author is their favorite, it's almost like they're saying that is the person they want to be like, or the person they most identify with. And Brian Laudrie had a deep, maybe even unhealthy fascination with Chuck Palahniuk, who is a brilliant author of Fight Club. Chuck Palahniuk's other work is much darker, much more disturbing than Fight Club. I think Fight Club is probably the only one that was tame enough to make into a movie. All of that said, I've decided to read the book Lullaby by Chuck Palahniuk in ASMR, and maybe you'll learn something about Brian Laudrie as well. The prologue and possibly the first chapter of Lullaby by Chuck Palahniuk. Prologue. At first, the new owner pretends he never looked at the living room floor. Never really looked. Not the first time they toured the house. Not when the inspector showed them through it. They'd measured rooms and told the movers where to set the couch and piano, hauled in everything they owned, and never really stopped to look at the living room floor. They pretend. Then, on the first morning, they come downstairs. There it is, scratched in the white oak floor. Get out! Some new owners pretend a friend has done it as a joke. Others are sure it's because they didn't trip the movers. A couple of nights later, a baby starts to cry from inside the north wall of the master bedroom. This is when they usually call. And this new owner on the phone is not what our hero Helen Hoover Boyle needs this morning. This stammering and whining. What she needs is a new cup of coffee and a 7-letter word for poultry. She needs to hear what's happening on the police scanner. Helen Boyle snaps her fingers until her secretary looks in from the outer office. Our hero wraps both hands around the mouthpiece and points the telephone receiver at the scanner, saying, "It's code 911. And her secretary, Mona, shrugs and says, So she needs to look it up in the code book. And Mona says, "Relax, it's a shoplifter." Murders, suicides, serial killers, accidental overdoses. You can't wait until this stuff is on the front page of the newspaper. You can't let another agent beat you into the next rainmaker. Helen needs the new owner at 325 Crestwood Terrace to shut up a minute. Of course, the message appeared in the living room floor. What's odd is the baby doesn't usually start until the third night. First, the phantom message, then the baby cries all night. If the owners last long enough, they'll be calling in another week about the face that appears reflected in the water when you fill the bathtub. A wadded up face of wrinkles, the eyes hollowed out dark holes. The third week brings the phantom shadows that circle around and around the dining room walls when everybody is seated at the table. There might be more events after that, but nobody lasted a fourth week. To the new owner, Helen Hoover Boyle says, unless you're ready to go to court and prove the house is unlivable, unless you can prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that the previous owners knew this was happening, she says, I have to tell you, she says, you lose a case like this after you generate all this bad publicity, and that house will be worthless. It's not a bad house, 325 Crestwood Terrace, English two-door, newer composition roof, 4 bedrooms, 3.5 baths, an in-ground pool. Hero doesn't even have to look at the fact sheet. She sold this house 6 times in the past 2 years. Another house, the New England Salt Box on Eaton Court, 6 bedrooms, 4 baths, paneled entryway, and blood running down the kitchen walls. She sold that house 8 times in the past 4 years. To the new owner, she says, gotta put you on hold for a minute, and she hits the red button. Helen, she's wearing a white suit and shoes, but not Snow White. It's more the white of downhill skiing in Banff with a private car and a driver on call, 14 pieces of matched luggage, and a suite at the Hotel Lake Louise. To the doorway, our hero says, Mona. Moonbeam. Louder, she says, Spirit Girl. She drums her pen against the folded newspaper page on her desk and says, what's a 3-letter word for rodent? The police scanner gargles words, mumbles, and barks, repeating, copy, after every line, repeating, copy. Helen Boyle shouts, this coffee is not going to cut it. In another hour, she needs to be showing a Queen Anne, 5 bedrooms with a mother-in-law apartment, 2 gas fireplaces, and the face of a barbiturate suicide that appears late at night in the powder room mirror. After that, there's a split-level ranch with fag heat, F-A-G heat, a sunken conversion pit, and the reoccurring phantom gunshots of a double homicide that happened over a decade ago. This is all in her thick daily planner, thick and bound in what looks like red leather. This is her record of everything. She takes another sip of coffee and says, what do you call this? Swiss Army mocha. Coffee is supposed to taste like coffee. Mona comes to the doorway with her arms folded across her front and says, what? And Helen says, I need you to swing by. She shuffles some fact sheets on her blotter. Swing by 4673 Wilmot Place. It's a Dutch colonial with a sunroom, 4 bedrooms, 2 baths, and an aggravated homicide. The police scanner says, copy. Just do the usual, Helen says, and she writes the address on a note and card and holds it out. Don't resolve anything. Don't burn any sage. Don't exercise shit. Mona takes the note card and says, just check it for vibes. Helen slashes the air with her hand and says, I don't want anybody going down on any tunnels toward any bright light. I want these freaks staying right here in this astral plane, thank you. She looks at her newspaper and says, they have all eternity to be dead. They can hang around in that house another 50 years and rattle some chains. Helen Hoover Boyle looks at the blinking bold light and says, what did you pick up at the 6-bedroom Spanish yesterday? And Mona rolls her eyes at the ceiling. She pushes out her jaw and blows a big sigh, straight up to flop the hair on her forehead, and says, there's a definite energy there, a subtle presence, but the floor plan is wonderful. A black silk cord loops around her neck and disappears into the corner of her mouth. And our hero says, screw the floor plan. Forget those dream houses you only sell once every 50 years. Forget those happy homes. And screw subtle cold spots, strange vapors, irritable pets. What she needed was blood running down the walls. She needed ice-cold visible hands that pulled children out of bed at night. basement stairs. That and decent curb appeal. The bungalow at 521 Elm Street, it has 4 bedrooms, original hardware, and screams in the attic. The French Normandy at 7645 Weston Heights has arched windows, a butler's pantry, leaded glass pocket door, and a body that appears in the upstairs hallway with multiple stab wounds. The ranch style at 248 Lullaby Place, 5 bedrooms, 4.5 baths with brick patio. It has the reappearing blood coughed up on the master bedroom walls after a drain cleaner poisoning. Distressed houses, realtors call them. These houses that never sold because no one liked to show them. No realtor wanted to host an open house there, risk spending any time there alone. Or these were the houses that sold again and sold again every 6 months, because no one could live there. A good string of these houses, 20 or 30 exclusives, and Helen can turn off the police scanner. She could quit searching the obituaries and the crime pages for suicides and homicides. She could stop sending Mona out to check on every possible lead. She could just kick back and find a 5-letter word for equine. Plus, I need you to pick up my cleaning, she says, and get some decent coffee. She points her pen at Mona and says, and out of respect for professionalism, leave the little Rasta doohickeys at home. Mona pulls back the silk cord until a crystal quartz pops out of her mouth, shining and wet. She blows on it, saying, it's a crystal. My boyfriend, Oyster, gave it to me. And Ellen says, you're dating a boy named Oyster? And Mona drops the crystal so it hangs against her chest and says, he says it's for my own protection. The crystal soaks a darker wet spot on her orange blouse. Oh, and before you go, Ellen says, get me Bill or Emily Burrows on the phone. Helen presses the hold button and says, sorry about that. She says there are a couple of clear options here. The new owner can move and just sign a quick claim deed, and the house becomes the bank's problem. Or, our hero says, you give me a confidential exclusive to sell the house, what we call a vest pocket listing. And maybe the new owner says no this time. But after that hideous face appears between his legs in the bathwater, after the shadows start marching around the walls, well, everyone says yes eventually. On the phone, the new owner says, and you won't tell any buyers about the problem. And Ellen says, don't even finish unpacking. We'll just tell people you're in the process of moving out. If anybody asks, tell them you're being transferred out of town. Tell them you love this house. She says, everything else will just be our little secret. From the outer office, Mona says, I have Bill Burrows on line 2. And the police scanner says, copy. Our hero hits the next button and says, Bill. She mouths the word of coffee at Mona. She jerks her head toward the window and mouths, go. The scanner says, do you copy? This was Helen Hoover Boyle, our hero. Now dead, but not dead. Here was just another day in her life. This was the life she lived before I came along. Maybe this is a love story, maybe not. It depends on how much I can believe myself. This is about Helen Hoover Boyle, her haunting me, the way a song stays in your head, the way you think life should be, how anything holds your attention, how your past goes with you into every day of your future. It's all of it, Helen Hoover Boyle. We're all of us haunted and haunting on this, the last ordinary day of her regular life. Our hero says into the phone, Bill Burrows. She says, you need to get Emily on the extension because I've just found you to the perfect new home. She writes the word horse and says, it's my understanding that the sellers are very motivated. Chapter 1. The problem with every story is you tell it after the fact. Even play-by-play description on the radio, the home runs and strikeouts, even that's delayed a few minutes. Even live television is postponed a couple of seconds. Even sound and light can only go so fast. Another problem is the teller, the who, what, where, when, and why of the reporter. The media bias, how the messenger shapes the facts, what journalists call the gatekeeper, how the presentation is everything, the story behind the story. Where I'm telling this from is one cafe after another, where I'm writing this book chapter by chapter, is never the same small town or city or truck stop in the middle of nowhere. What these places all have in common are miracles. You read about this stuff in the pulp tabloids, the kind of healings and sightings, the miracles that never get reported in mainstream press. This week is the Holy Virgin of Wellburn, New Mexico. She came flying down Main Street last week, her long red and black dreadlocks whipping behind her, her bare feet dirty. She wore an Indian cotton shirt printed in the shades of brown denim halter top. It's all in this week's World Miracles Report, next to the cashier in every supermarket in America. And here I am, a week late, always one step behind, after the fact. The Flying Virgin had fingernails painted bright pink with white tips. A French manicure, some witnesses called it. The Flying Virgin used a can of Bug-Off brand insect fogger, and across the blue New Mexican sky she wrote, "Stop having babies." The can of Bug-Off she dropped. It's right now headed for the Vatican for analysis. Right now, you can buy postcards of the event, videos even. Almost everything you can buy is after the fact. Caught, dead, cooked. In the souvenir videos, the Flying Virgin shakes the can of fogger floating above one end of Main Street. She waves at the crowd, and there's a bush of brown hair under her arm. The moment before she starts writing, a gust of wind lifts her skirt, and the Flying Virgin's not wearing any panties. Between her legs, she's shaved. This is where I'm writing this story from today. Here in a roadside diner, talking to witnesses in Wellburn, New Mexico. Here with me is Sarge, a baked potato of an old Irish cop. On the table between us is the local newspaper, folded to show a 3-column ad that says, "Attention patrons of all plush interiors furniture stores." The ad says, if poisonous spiders have hatched from your new upholstered furniture, you may be eligible to take part in a class action lawsuit. And the ad gives a phone number you can call, but it's no use. The Sarge has the kind of loose neck skin that if you pinch it, when you let go the skin stays pinched. He has to find a mirror and rub the skin to make it go flat. Outside the diner, people are still driving into town. People kneel and pray for another visitation. The Sarge puts his big mitts together and pretends to pray, his eyes rolled sideways to look out the window, his holster unsnapped, his pistol loaded and ready for skeet shooting. After she was done skywriting, the Flying Virgin blew kisses to people. She flashed a 2-finger peace sign. She hovered just above the trees, clutching her skirt closed with one fist, and she took her red and black dreadlocks back and waved an amen. She was gone, behind the mountains, over the horizon, gone. Still, you can't trust everything you read in the newspaper. The Flying Madonna, it wasn't a miracle, it was magic. These aren't saints, they're spells. The Sarge and me, we're not here to witness anything. We're witch hunters. Still, this isn't a story about here and now. Me, the Sarge, the Flying Virgin, Helen Hoover Boyle. What I'm writing is the story of how we met, how we got here. Chapter 2. They ask you just one question just before you graduate from journalism school. They tell you to imagine you're a reporter. Imagine you work at a daily big city newspaper, and one Christmas Eve your editor sends you out to investigate a death. The police and paramedics are there. The neighbors wearing bathrobes and slippers crowd the hallway of the slummy tenement. Inside the apartment, a young couple is sobbing beside their Christmas tree. Their baby has choked to death on an ornament. You get what you need, the baby's name and age and all, and you get back to the newspaper around midnight and write the story on press deadline. You submit it to your editor and he rejects it because you don't say the color of the ornament. Was it red or green? You couldn't look and you didn't think to ask. With the press room screaming for the front page, your choices are call the parents in as the color or refuse the call and lose your job. This was the fourth estate, journalism, and where I went to school, just this one question is the entire final exam for the ethics course. It's an either-or question. My answer was to call the paramedics. Items like this have to be cataloged. The ornament had to be bagged and photographed in some file of evidence. No way would I call the parents after midnight on Christmas Eve. The school gave my ethics a D. Instead of ethics, I learned only to tell people what they want to hear. I learned to write everything down, and I learned editors can be real assholes. Since then, I still wonder what that test was really about. I'm a reporter now, on a big city daily, and I don't have to imagine anything. My first real baby was on a Monday morning in September. There was no Christmas ornament, no neighbors crowded around the trailer house in the suburbs. One paramedic sat with the parents in the kitchenette and asked them the standard questions. The second paramedic took me back to the nursery and showed me what they usually find in the crib. The standard questions paramedics ask include: who found the child dead? When was the child found? Was the child moved? When was the child last seen alive? Was the child breastfed or bottle fed? The questions seem random, but all doctors can do is gather statistics and hope someday a pattern will emerge. The nursery was yellow, with blue flowered curtains at the windows and white wicker chest of drawers next to the curb. There was a white painted rocking chair. Above the crib was a mobile of yellow plastic butterflies. On the wicker chest was a book. On the floor was a blue braided rag rug. On one wall was a framed needlepoint. It said Thursday's child has far to go. The room smelled like baby powder. And maybe I didn't learn ethics, but I learned to pay attention. No detail is too minor to note. The open book was called Poems and Rhymes from Around the World, and it was checked out from the county library. My editor's plan was to do a 5-part series on sudden infant death syndrome. Every year, 7,000 babies die without any apparent cause. 2 out of every 1,000 babies will just go to sleep and never wake up. My editor, Duncan, he kept calling it crib death. The details about Duncan, as he's pocked with acne scars and his scalp is brown with long hair, line every 2 weeks when he dyes his gray roots. His computer password is password. All we know about sudden infant death is there is no pattern. Most babies die between midnight and morning, but a baby will also die while sleeping beside his parents. It can die in a car seat or in a stroller. A baby can die in its mother's arms. There are so many people with infants, my editor said. It's the type of story that every parent and grandparent is too afraid to read and too afraid not to read. There's really no information, but the idea was to profile 5 families that had lost a child. Show how people cope, how people move forward in their lives. Here and there, we could salt in the standard facts about crib death. We could show the deep inner well of strength and compassion each of these people discovers. That angle, because it ties to no specific event, it's what you call soft news. We'd run it on the front of the lifestyle section. For art, we could show smiling pictures of healthy babies. that were now dead. We'd show how this could happen to anyone. That was his pitch. It's the kind of investigative piece you do for awards. It was late summer, and the news was slow. This was the peak time of year for last-term pregnancies and newborns. It was my editor's idea for me to tag along with paramedics. The Christmas story, the sobbing couple, the ornament by now I'd been working for so long.